Hello, dear guests. Hello, dear guests, friends, old friends and new friends alike. Absolutely. So, hello and greetings, and thank you so much for coming to the event, which is commemorating 30 years from Srebrenica, and which we also use as an opportunity to look into this, well, a third of a century, and to try to see how did this event characterize Dutch-Bosnian relations, and even more importantly, what are all those problems which are facing people who are integrating into the Netherlands who are of Bosnian origin. A whole generation later, we have so many people from different parts of this country which are simply growing up here and which are trying to make sense of the broken past in order to chart out the better future. So this is the general point of this gathering, and this is why we assembled such a vast array of outstanding speakers. My name is Vladimir Petrovic, and I work at NIO, the Institute for War, Holocaust, and Genocide Studies. And I have prepared quite a beautiful and long speech about why we are all here tonight. However, in the interest of time, which is going to be the biggest challenge, now that I see so many of you, and many of us are following us via live stream, there is absolutely no reason to say why are we all here. The very number of people speaks to itself, that we are here because this is an important and very, very relevant topic. NIO, the Institute for War, Holocaust, and Genocide Studies has quite a long experience of dealing with the issue of the Yugoslav War, of the Bosnian War, of the Srebrenica genocide, and over the years we learned that sometimes it's wiser to listen than to talk, and our role tonight will be more or less such. To that end, I will take the back seat, a part of introducing you to the speakers. They all have very rich biographies, and again, it would take us quite some time to explore all the aspects of their professional life. If you look at your cell phones, you would be able to take a look at what they did and did not do, but I can just tell you that I'm honored to be in their presence for so many reasons. I will just jump in here and there in order to make the conversation run smooth, even though in my experience talking about Srebrenica, these conversations very rarely are smooth, and that's exactly how it is supposed to be, because this is not a smooth topic at all. So let me start by introducing, you can look at the list of the speakers here. We agreed that Professor Haris Halilovic will start first because he traversed quite a number of countries in order to be here with us tonight, and he will be talking about, well, my good sir, I think you should best introduce the topic yourself, and such would also be the case with the rest of the speakers. Haris, please, if you would take the stand, and again, thank you to all of you for coming tonight, and to all of you.
Thank you, Vladimir. Thank you, NIO, the University of Amsterdam, dear colleagues and friends. It is quite humbling to be standing in front of you here and to be talking about this very important topic. As I understand, I've got 8 minutes to present what I prepared, and I've got I try to conceptualize, kind of to present four different sections of the narrative about Dutch, Bosnian, Srebrenica story. So the first one will start with and there will be some visual and some audio aspects of my presentation. As Vladimir said, I did come across the world all the way from Australia with a short stopover in Sarajevo, but I'm a local from Bosnia in a way and from Srebrenica, and so part of this story is very deeply personally connected to myself as it is to Alma. So, but I hope to be able to detach in a way. The painting here is by Bosnian artist Dr. Adis Fezic, and in a way is his visualization of how he sees dispersion of people, post-genocide reality of Bosnia, with an empty bridge, red sun above the river, and so on. Here are a few postcards from Bosnia. These are not historical photographs, they are contemporary photographs taken last year. This is how region of eastern Bosnia around Srebrenica looks like these days. And me being an anthropologist, and anthropologists study living cultures. It is quite a challenge to study living cultures in places that are no more, that more resemble kind of the archaeological research. And unlike anthropologists, archaeologists study dead cultures. So, but there are some living people, at least they attempt to come to the places, and they are mostly the survivors, elderly people. Most of those are war widows, and sadly, even from this picture, one of the ladies who returned passed away. She's one of my participants who used to be late Zlatia. The attempts to recover in these remote former communities destroyed through genocide look like this. And now I'll move from these contemporary postcards to historical postcard, which is a card, or that can be found on the internet, and it actually comes from the internet. It's one of the photographs that's it's very much represents the pain of the survivors, genocide survivors from Bosnia, and is also represents shame of Dutch people, or not just the Dutch government. So here come to represent something traumatic. United Nations has attempted to deal with Srebrenica legacy through their own investigation and report. And Secretary General Kofi Annan acknowledged that this was the darkest day in the history of UN. I paraphrase, but something along those words. Similarly, Dutch governments, unlike any other government, has wrestled with this topic from the very beginning. In 1996, as we know, this very organization, NIOD, was instructed or given a mandate to develop a report. So, Srebrenica NIOD report, which took years to deliver, and in spite of all these shortcomings, it's a very important document that resulted in resigning of the Dutch government at the time, so 2002. And that's a very, very big kind of moral stand that the Dutch government has done. So survivors, genocide survivors, also approached a Dutch judicial system to deal with their own injustices, and they sued the Dutch government in the Netherlands, and at all instances they won. And one of the people actually who was part of that legal process is Alma Mustafic, the case Nuhanovic Mustafic versus Netherlands. They won, and it was also groundbreaking ruling that led not only to acknowledgement of what happened to these two families, but actually also to establishment of a foundation, Nuhanovic Foundation, which has mandate, as we know now, to empower survivors throughout the world, and they have already had cases from other countries. So Elizabeth, the lawyer who represented the families, actually was behind this. Also, that ruling led to Dutch government accepting a liability of 10%. Somehow, had to be quantified for killings of over 300 people initially, and then this extended to up to 3,000 people who happened to be on the 11th of July, on the 13th of July, actually, in Potocari, and that has led to some, we can say symbolic compensation, but to survivors, like in those villages that I showed, receiving 10,000 euros meant a lot still. So Dutch has also, Dutch government has apologized, a few years ago, 2022, and this is also something that's very well perceived. University of Amsterdam has still an ongoing project, and I see Edna here, and is part of that, on Facing Srebrenica, a very unique, very special project that brings not only survivors from Srebrenica genocide, but also those who are sometimes named as bystanders, who are sometimes labeled and blamed, and in many ways kind of put to shame. And these are Dutch veterans, soldiers who happen to be there, many of them being young men without really having much agency, as they had to follow the orders that did not come. So there's a unique project that's still ongoing and is bringing also kind of the lost archives, the personal photographs that Dutch soldiers had, and also the survivors, which in a way honors the memory of the missing people. And here I listed also the partners of this important project. So this is the part of kind of Dutch story. But people make stories, and people also make places. As I said, those places in Bosnia don't exist because there are no people anymore there. And Bosnians in Netherlands are kind of the direct result of the Bosnian war and genocide. Before 1992 and 95, Bosnians did not represent major immigrant group in any of the countries. They were, guest workers in Western Europe. Occasionally they would, some adventurers might end up in Australia, like, but not like myself, who actually went to Australia in '98 after the war, because of the war. So, and the Netherlands has become very important for Bosnians. Down in Bosnia, Netherlands is probably has become one of the most important European country. So before the war, maybe Heineken, maybe Ajax, maybe some of these stereotypes about Dutch flowers, and they were, but that's what Dutch were known for. But after the war, from The Hague, the tribunal, to all these rulings and many other kind of important events that took place here have made the Netherlands very important country. And what makes also this country special, and what makes connection, are the people who, for Bosnian refugees who came during the war. In 1992, they were from Prijedor, from Western Bosnia. After the war, and quite late after, in the refugee cycle, survivors from Srebrenica came to the Netherlands, and many of them came hoping that they will be able to find truth about their missing relatives. And as we know, family Mustafic actually initiated that through legal process. A few years ago, in 2017, I led a project funded by IOM, International Organization for Migration, UNDP, and Bosnian Ministry for Human Rights and Refugees, to map Bosnian diaspora across the world. So, of course, we had to be selective. And we also selected the Netherlands, not because there are, hundreds of Bosnians living here, but because of that importance. And there are some interesting findings, and I'll just go through. This is where they live. But young people young Bosnians who either were born or came as children to the Netherlands as refugees have done exceptionally well, according to the research that we conducted, about the 40%, and also the statistics from the Dutch government. So 40% of them have went to universities and obtained university degrees, which is higher than Dutch average. So if you're going to look for kind of role model immigrant group, then Bosnians really are this in the Netherlands. Also, in terms of employment, they are close to the average of Dutch born people. And this also shows a resilience of the survivors who have ended up in this country as refugees. Unlike what we also found, that unlike many other countries that accepted Bosnian refugees, they have not developed a very broad, or kind of in terms of numbers, they haven't developed many diaspora organizations, which of course also shows the context in immigration policy of the Netherlands, which is very specific. And what we found is that this, in a way, represents a very high degree of their integration. So that unlike, for example, Sweden or Australia or United States, where there are hundreds of diaspora organizations and clubs and so on, in the Netherlands we have actually a dozen or so. Now to move from the Dutch Bosnian story to more kind of the domain of culture, which is, as an anthropologist, as you understand, might be, it's one of my priorities in terms of research. So what I have come in my research, I've actually kind of novel part of looking how memorialization is being, how survivors, children of genocide, and survivors of genocide have memorialized. It's not only through participating in commemorative events, going back to Bosnia, but also really in a very, very innovative, original way, also specific to this generation, using tattoos which have become kind of part of popular culture or youth culture these days across the world, to inscribe on their bodies memories of their lost fathers, lost relatives. And I'm only sharing the photos of two men who wanted to be, to their faces to be shown. And others also have, symbolic, as you can see on this one, they are the whole kind of, there's a prayer, Islamic prayer tattooed on the biceps of a young man. There's also a prayer bead on the other one. So And they are also both men and boys use these tattoos. And they have their meanings. So they just might look cool, but they have very specific meanings, like the one here representing, a horoscope sign of a father who was lost. On the other pictures, I have others. Bosnians have well integrated, and they also have, these young people. One of these born to refugee parents is my namesake Haris Alagic, a young man who actually has become a celebrity in this country by, becoming a well-known singer and winner. And there are also a lot of cultural exchanges that happen through popular culture to music with band No Roots I picked up here, performing and being quite welcome in the Netherlands. And there's a case, of course, Dutch young people going to Bosnia, going to Srebrenica. There's a young musician living in Srebrenica, playing music, and coming here, earning money, and going back. So these are all this that this generation, what I want to say, is doing something new, something novel. And if you talk about reconciliation of some sort, really, we should look up to them. The genocide, Srebrenica, war, and the Dutch part of it has also become part of popular culture in Bosnia. The most famous rap singer, hip-hop singer in Bosnia, or, he was born in Bosnia, but lives between Croatia and Israel and different places. In one of his famous songs, he does mention these stereotypes, which I mentioned from the beginning, for which Netherlands has been known. There's, about, said here, you've heard of Srebrenica, I don't like to talk about it, but after that, there's no man I'm afraid of. Fear does not exist for me anymore, nor does God. Not after my father, brother, and my city died. Since then, I hate Holland, Ajax, flowers, and the Dutch. That's in that hip-hop song. And it is really about kind of the stereotypes, which, in a way, have no one is indifferent, and some people might actually feel as expressed in this song. But the task of us researchers, of the survivors, is really to give identities, give stories, to humanize the people who were dehumanized with the act of genocide. And I'll finish off with Edo Majka, that hip-hop singer, and his song, which is in Bosnian. Thank you very much. I think I might have exceeded my
Sometimes there's things about
Dragi babo moj, volite sin tvoj, na tebe mislim često, svaki dan od kad si nesto. Pričao nam je teta, konj je dobio metak, da se razdvojili ti oni Sajo, onda kad je grad pado. Nikad neću zaboraviti onaj dan, kad je Sajo došao iz logora, kad mi rekao imaš pozdrav od staroga. Da ima Boga, došao bio na razmeni, svaki dan je mati otad govorila meni. I tako cijeli rat smo živjeli od razmene do razmene. Za sve si mrtav, al babo nisi za mene. Kod svake organizacije tražio sam informacije, makar bilo šta, ali niko ovde ne zna ništa. Molim Boga da lažu kad kažu da si mrtav, ali sam znaš kakav je odvratan svijet naš. Pričao mi je jedan što radi u Muri, da je bio zatvoren u logoru u Srbiji i da je jedan isti ti kleo se nemaš im nije bio zatvoren u istom logoru i to baš s njim. A mati ko mati, babo, ona najgore pati. Jedno vrijeme je pila, nije znala šta sa sobom da radi. Išla je ko žena što u grahu gledaju, pomalo se nadala, nadu grahom povećavala.
It's about the anguish of a person who is trying to do their best to find somebody who disappeared, so who is not necessarily dead, might be alive. However, that chance always exists, no matter how unlikely. And it's a sort of a promise of a kid to a father with their severed relationships. So with that in mind, Harise, Professor Ruiz, thank you so much. Thank you so much. My ungrateful situation today is also to have to cut people whom I respect a lot, and I apologize for that in advance. So I would have to be a bit mindful of the time. Don't take it against me. With that in mind, without further ado, I want to give the floor to Alma Mustafić, who was mentioned just about 7 times already in the process. I still think it would be best for her to explain what is it that she does, because she does a hell of a lot of things. So, Alma, thank you so much for showing up tonight, and please, the floor is yours.
Sorry. Those who knows me, you know, when I start to talk, I cannot stop, so I put it on paper, and then I think I will manage. Yeah. Yeah. But before we start, I want to talk about dehumanization, because dehumanization is key to every genocide. Just yesterday I saw this video and I immediately recognized him, my nephew and neighbor, Dino Halilovic. I sent a message to Haris, "Is this Dino?" And in seconds he replied, "Yes, it's Dino." I start to cry. He looks just like my baby boy, and Dino was the same age as my daughter is now, not even 15 years old. I imagine what his mother, Namka, must have felt when he was taken from her arms, knowing he would be killed. What was his crime? He was different. He was considered less human by people like Karadzic, Mladic, and Milosevic. But Dino was human, just like you and me. He had dreams. What would he have become? We'll never know. He became a number, one of 8,372 victims of Srebrenica genocide. But he was more than just a number. And let me share one story about Dino with you. During the war, we kids kept growing, but our clothes and shoes did not. Dino got huge feet, and he had to wear his father's rubber boots. But we also were kids, and we just wanted to play, and the forest felt safest, less likely to be shelled. We were building a tree house. Dino, his sister Jemka, my brother Damir, our cousin Erko, Elma, and me. Suddenly, a shell fell nearby. We ran to the shelter, counting heads. Alma, Damir, Erko, Elma, Jemka, Dino, 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 Dino! Dino was missing. My brother and I, we ran back. We found him hanging upside down, stuck in the tree. His boots were too big. He couldn't get them off, so we helped him, and shells were still falling around, but we were just glad that he was alive, at least that day. I believe it's our Dutch responsibility to know the stories of those people, because we were found responsible for their deaths. Not to assign blame, but to learn from history, because forgetting them is killing them again. So what can we do now? We can try to give them their humanity back. Because we, as Bosnian Muslims, we were robbed of our humanity. We were dehumanized and still are, even today, just like Palestinians. To repair this great injustice, we must rehumanize the victims of genocide. And that starts with asking, what can I do? We, as Dutch, we were found legally responsible for the death of Rizo Mustafic, Ibro Nuhanovic, Muhammad Nuhanovic, and hundreds of others whose names we don't even know. Yet the main view in the Netherlands remains, there was nothing we could do. Bullshit. A judge ruled. No, Dutch judge ruled. There was something we could have done. We could have saved lives, hundreds of them. I thought this knowledge would leave the courtroom and enter the society, but it didn't happen. After the court case, I realized if I wanted my new home, the Netherlands, to take responsibility, I had to act myself. As an educational scientist, I advocate for better education about Srebrenica genocide, but it led nowhere. Education mostly focused on Dutch-blood soldiers, not on the Bosnian Dutch community or our experience. Even at my own university, I could hear Srebrenica, that genocide isn't relevant for Dutch society. So I turned to theater. Together with others, I created a powerful play, Dangerous Names, that told the story of Srebrenica from the perspective of the Bosnian Dutch survivors. The reactions were overwhelming. Dutch people came, they listened, they cried, they cared. They said this was powerful. We want to help, but we don't know how. And these questions led us to a research project at my university, and the findings were clear. People were shocked by how little they knew about genocide in general and Srebrenica genocide in particular, and they wanted to know more. They wanted to learn how genocide happens, how ordinary people are turned into targets or killers. And from that research, we found ways to make genocide more understandable to the general public, not knowing then how relevant the definition of genocide would become in just a few months. So this is our concept, and you are the first one to see it. How we try to explain the complex process of the genocide to the regular people so that they understand that genocide is much more than just killing people. As you can see, we add the 11th stage of genocide, glorification, which is added by Halilovic while he was researching Bosnian genocide. And we added to the well-known 10-stage scale of genocide by Standen. So we started explaining genocide as a process, not just as mass murder, but as a process where dehumanization play a huge role. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts about this? But we can discuss that later on. And I want to thank Anita Karabasic. Anita, please, where are you? Yeah, I'm really good with the words, but she's really good with visualizing it. So this is how you can translate research papers into something that reach public. So I understand if I want to raise awareness about Bosnian genocide, I had to use different forms. Education and research only are not enough. You need to translate them into something like this, infographic, theaters, exhibitions, film, and so on. So this is one example how I try to use research and education into the storytelling and to make the genocide process understandable for general to broader audience. From there, I gathered brilliant minds around me, and before I knew, we had an amazing team of people committed to put the Bosnian-Dutch perspective at the center when we are talking about Bosnian genocide. And this is how the multimedial project, the 11 Voices of Srebrenica, was born. We published survivor story, not only showing their trauma and their pain, but also their talents, qualities and dreams, and not just victims in tears like we often see. This is my daughter. She's selected for the Dutch hockey team under 15. Another story is about Pamela Habibovic. She is rector of a university in Maastricht. Her father, Hamdia, was never found, and he was killed in Srebrenica genocide. More stories will follow, not only from Srebrenica, also from Prijedor, Sarajevo, Visegrad, and so on, because we want Dutch society to realize that genocide did not start 11 July 1995. Later on, we will launch also a podcast serial about Bosnian Dutch survivors, and we will have 2 exhibitions. I know this is too much information. Just follow us on Insta, the 11 Voices of Srebrenica, and then you will be up to date. But this work takes a lot of time, energy, money, and we don't have it. Almost all of the work being done by Bosnian Dutch community is voluntary. There is no structural funding to keep the memory of Srebrenica genocide alive, even though the Dutch were found legally responsible. So I have to say this, it's not personal, but we don't need Dutch state or Dutch ministers to show up in Potocari in Srebrenica once a year and give a speech, especially when our minister failed to mention our own Dutch responsibility. Yes, Srebrenica is international responsibility, but it's also our Dutch responsibility. And we, as Dutch, still haven't taken that very seriously. In short, this is what I'm trying to do, to raise awareness about our own Dutch responsibility when it comes to Srebrenica genocide. And this responsibility brings with it a moral obligation to act and to do something, to learn who the victims were, what were their names, what were their dreams, who could they have become if they haven't been killed for just being different. It's 30 years ago. It's time to change how we deal with Srebrenica genocide. It's time to teach, to research, to create art about it in the way that it deserves. Because this was the last genocide in Europe, and whether we like it or not, we, as Dutch, were there. We can and we must do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Alma. I think now we reminded ourselves of the extent of damage that was brought to the community within only a couple of days. However, I want to also add that Alma Mustavic is also trying to show that Srebrenica, important as is also one of the many places that have been suffering tremendously, and it is on her insistence that we made this today, on the 30th. I know it was really difficult for all of you to come, given that it's holiday week, but the reason that she insisted was the commemoration of events that transpired in Prijedor in late spring of 1992, where Dutch were not present, but that doesn't really diminish the moral obligation to understand what was happening there. So Alma, if you could just say a word about where people might appear tomorrow, I would be most grateful to you. Or Haris as well, because this was also one of the reasons that he came today and not any other day of the week.
Yeah, I don't know if there's somebody who organized this commemoration of the white armbands in Rotterdam. So tomorrow there will be a gathering at 2 o'clock in Rotterdam, the Machinist, or what is the name? Machinist, thank you. And I would like to invite you to go there and to see how we try to commemorate our loved ones. So this is exactly why we choose 30th of May, so that we could link Srebrenica to other places. Thank you very much for mentioning this.
So welcome. And now when we saw what the extent of the damage was, I think we may turn to another segment of our get-together today, which is to see what is it that can and cannot be done about it, to remedy it, to somewhat address it. And we have two interlocutors who are speaking about it from a very, very different perspective. So I think we might start with Sabina, who will tell us what is happening in terms of commemorations to come or not to come. More about it in just a moment. So please, Dr. Tanovic, take the stand.
Thank you, Vlado. Let me just see if I can. Yeah. Unfortunately, I will continue pointing fingers and zoom in and be quite technical, unlike Alma. It's always very difficult to speak after you. Although officially this is my first time publicly to speak after you because it's so emotional and personal. Thank you. So I'm here to give you some insights about a process of creating a national monument for Srebrenica genocide 1995. And of course, before this initiative, there were more initiatives. The one I'm aware of was in 2012, when a Dutch artist envisioned and made this design and called it Steen van Geduld, so stone of patience. He did not consult the survivors while depicting this name, so the survivors had to write an official letter asking why is it called as it is called. And then what followed was that it was renamed into 11 Juli 1995, so 11 July 1995, without, obviously, word Srebrenica and the word genocide in it. It was supposed to be placed in Westerbork, and this, of course, again upset the survivors because these two words are obviously crucial for the recognition of what they went through. Quite some years passed, and they reached out to me because they knew some of my work about memorial spaces, and I'm interested in how we create them, the processes behind them, the invisible work. So this is what I will try to kind of really tell you in 5 minutes. I do have 15 slides, so bear with me, please. This will be a marathon. With different groups, as Haris explained, there are not many in the Netherlands, so some that we had, and we as advisors, we formed the stichting, or the work group, actually, first. So that was a work group where we brainstormed and thought what this process should be, what we actually want. Around that same time, well, year after, was the 25th anniversary commemoration of Srebrenica genocide, and it was for the first time that we had this active memorial created by the Bosnian Girl Collective, which inspired, I dare to say so, a lot of people to think differently in terms of what traditional monument is and what it can be. Throughout this process, we also formed, as the process grew, actually, we formed an advisory board with very important people in it for consultation and guidance. And importantly, the initiative was supported by the Mayor of The Hague, Mayor of Rotterdam, and Minister of Defense and Minister of Foreign Affairs. Our proposal and our concept is to have the process as transparent as possible, as inclusive as possible, even though these are words we often hear, but they're not really practiced as such. So technically, there were two trajectories in this process. First one was many discussions and brainstorming about what are the requirements and wishes of these communities and groups that were involved in the process. So what is it that we want in terms of aesthetics, symbolics, and function? And the second trajectory was the location research, because as I have seen in practice, location is always the most difficult part, well, not always, but mostly the most difficult part of creating a memorial in public space, because it's very, very difficult to find a proper, valuable location where everybody is happy to have a memorial place. As we actually have seen in Amsterdam with Name Monument, for example. So these two processes went parallel, and after some meetings and consideration, we agreed collectively that the place in front of the former Hague Tribunal, or RCTY, was the place to put such this memorial, particularly because of its historical value, its emotional value, and its educational value. Unfortunately, this is why you see the thunder. Once we announced that and wanted to set the process, you realize that the national government already has a plan for this building, that it was already supposed to be occupied by another international institution, which required very high security measures. This would inevitably mean that the building has to basically change fundamentally, and that our plan and our concept was impossible. Many more things followed. I don't have time to talk about it right now, but one of the important meetings that happened after this was meeting with Dutch Rijksbouwmeester, or the chief architect of the Netherlands, and the mayor of The Hague in 2021. And specifically, the chief architect wanted to help with the process because he had quite bad experience with the creation of the Namen Monument in The Hague. So this can be seen as a positive development, because what followed was a quick scan research of the location. And once it was done by the local government, so the Hague government, there actually was no reaction really from the national government. It went back and fro, but up to this moment, we still don't have a positive, concrete reaction by Dutch national government regarding our process and creation of the national monument. However, a very symbolic gesture. Do you actually hear me? Because suddenly the microphone. Okay, great. The very strong symbolic gesture happened just last year for the 29th commemoration of Srebrenica genocide, when organization of the commemoration put, our groups included, put the symbolic white flower wreath in front of the invisible or missing memorial in front of the former ICTY building or Churchill Plain 1. This sparked a lot of media attention, and the City Council of The Hague asked they asked for action, and that happened. So suddenly there was incentive to do something. Of course, this was not ideal because we wanted this transparent process, which I already announced, which is, of course, always a longue durée process because it involves a lot of stakeholders. But this time we had to create something very quickly. So it was not possible, for example, to organize a public competition to invite young designers to contribute with their designs. So we had to do something for a so-called placeholder or plaatsmaker because why? What does it actually mean? A placeholder is a symbolic gesture into a public space that literally does what it says, so it holds a place for a future memorial, because out of the first trajectory which I mentioned, it came out that having a traditional monument is not actually sufficient 30 years after the genocide happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina. What is needed is educational space, informational space, and a memorial space that does much more than just symbolically mark a public space. So to create this is, of course, not as easy as it sounds. So the place marker is there to actually tell us that it will come in the future. But we now, at the same time, have, again, two processes happening. One is for the place marker, and the other one is where we are pushing this process towards creating the actual future memorial towards the national government. And what does a placeholder actually mean, and for whom is it for? To go in a little more detail about it, is that it would be a first tangible location to mark the genocide. It would be a marker indicating where the monument will be placed in the future. It's a meaningful stopping point during the Marsh Mira, so that's an annual walk performed every year in The Hague, and flowers are normally laid on this spot. There will be, obviously, a visual connection with the former ICTY building or Churchill Plain 1. And we want to convey the message that the monument is widely supported, because there are a lot of different people who indeed support this process. And it will be finally a place where to educate people until the actual memorial is made. So I'm not going to tell you, maybe you're disappointed or expected, I will give you some aesthetic insights in what it will be. I will instead invite you to the unveiling of the placeholder on the 11th of July in front of the former ICTY building, or it will be on the Churchill Plain 1. So please do come and support us. And because the idea was to bring some topics or ideas for a possible discussion today for a panel, these three things I think are important to mention, and maybe we can discuss them after Alada presents. So it's crucial to engage directly with victims, survivors, and their families to understand their needs and actively support them in realizing their needs. The second point is what I already said about inclusivity and transparency of the process. This is often said, but not often practiced. And the third thing is a greater political priority must be given to acknowledge and to taking also responsibility for a nation's historical injustices. This is more or less what Alma already said, so I'm just reiterating this. And this is my final slide. I would like to explain the flower I'm wearing today. It is made by survivors of Srebrenica and families and members of their families who are in our group, in our stichting now. It's not anymore Werkgroep, but stichting for the National Monument Memorial. And for me, this is such a poignant, strong, powerful symbol because survivors themselves changed. They added red and black to the originally white and green flower of Srebrenica to show their solidarity, to show the understanding of what is happening right now as we speak. On our screens, we can see it, right? And I would like to also discuss accountability of institutions like the one we are here right now, and other institutions which are there to preserve the memory and how this memory is weaponized in past 20 months. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabina. I think it was really insightful, and I would also like to say a couple of things. These events are often one-offs. You know, commemorating is always there is something nasty about it. Like it's 30 years and then nothing in 31st, 32nd, 33rd, and then you do it again at 35 and so on. So I also think that another takeaway here is to know that there is literally a calendar of events which are related to these things. Therefore, I would reiterate, tomorrow in Rotterdam at 2 o'clock, next to Maschina, you said, there would be an event commemorating the White Arms Bands Day of Prijedor, and then again in a month or so, Mrs. Stanovic invited us to partake in an event at the placeholder of the monument in The Hague. And the date is, again, I'm sorry,
11th July, exactly.
On the 11th of July. It's a date which is difficult to forget. If you don't know where to come in Rotterdam, there is a student of ours. We have an MA program in Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and the student of ours, Stijn van Dijn, who is right over there in the back. If you can just kind of like stand so that they can, would probably be happy to take you to Rotterdam tomorrow because he's likely to be at that event because he's writing his dissertation exactly on what had happened in Prijedor, and even more importantly so, how did people from Prijedor acculturate themselves once they were, once they found themselves in the Netherlands in 92 and 93. This is also a plea for those of you who are from Prijedor and who had been through similar experiences, again, to reach out to Stijn after the... Stijn, stand up just for a moment. It's nothing to be ashamed of. So if there is anybody from Prijedor who is organizing this event tomorrow or who would like to share his insights with Stijn, my department will be very grateful to you. All these considered, I think it's time exactly to go to our next to last speaker, Mr. Gert Hauptmann. Please take the stand. As you know, this event is called the Dutch Bosnian Perspectives, and it seems as if those were all Bosnian perspectives and now the Dutch one comes from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but this is not completely truth, because all of these, let's say, Bosnians have a very firm Dutch leg in one way or another. As you saw, Alma's daughter, his surname is Berlijn, and she is in the hockey team of the Netherlands. I'm so impressed about it. And by the same token, even though Gert had been holder of a number of extremely important institutional positions in the Dutch Foreign Affairs, and he will tell us more about what he did and why he did so, I think that he also has to say something about the Balkans and Bosnia, which is not necessarily from the Dutch-centered perspective. However, I'm also curious to see what he's going to say, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Vladimir, and thank you and all of you to give me the opportunity to say a few words on Bosnia and Srebrenica. I will do that. I'm from Foreign Affairs. I've been working for Foreign Affairs now for a couple of decades. One of my first positions in the ministry was a junior press officer. It was in the period of the massacre of the genocide in 1995. And I still vividly remember how that event impacted my colleagues and myself. I had the opportunity to then assist or accompany Minister van Mierlo, who was then Minister of Foreign Affairs, to some international conferences. Obviously, you know, it is incomparable to the personal experiences that were shared here today, but for me, that was my first connection with Srebrenica, you could say. I was in Paris in 1995 when the Dayton Peace Agreement was signed, with which we are still dealing, and I will say a few words on that later. Today, and I think which has to a certain extent secured peace and stability in current day Bosnia and Herzegovina. After 30 years now, I'm still back, you could say, because in between I've served in different diplomatic missions. But it is perhaps fate that after now 30 years later I'm again dealing with Bosnia and Srebrenica. Actually, I'm going there on Monday Twice a year I visit Sarajevo as part of the Netherlands delegation to the Peace Implementation Council, actually, which is a group of countries that are responsible for the Dayton Peace Agreement. What I will do, and I mean, my story is basically on foreign relations and our relations with Bosnia. How did they develop over the past years, and how do we look at the situation in Bosnia? So less personal, less emotional, but I hope it adds, you know, to the conversation we have today. First of all, Srebrenica, I think Alma already mentioned. I mean, you mentioned the word we can do more. Definitely, we can do more. But I hope also to show that over the past years and also currently, you know, there is still also from the Dutch political perspective and international relations perspective, you know, an enormous attachment to Srebrenica, and an acknowledgement, you know, how we share Bosnia and the Netherlands, the Bosnian community in the Netherlands, but also others in the Netherlands, you know, how we share this black page in our joint history. And this acknowledgement of the importance, I want to mention that it was referred to as well. I think it was very important that on July 2022 in Potocari, our then Minister of Defense, Mrs. Kasia Orlungren, offered the government's deepest apologies to the genocide's survivors. She stressed that the peacekeepers' powerlessness and acknowledged also the political responsibility the Netherlands shares with the international community. None of the international community, not the UN, it was mentioned, has gone so far. I mean, it may not be enough, but I think it was in a way exceptional for the Netherlands, but also internationally. Now, since then, I mean, the Netherlands has attended the events, the annual commemoration in Potocari. This year, my Minister Veldkamp, will be there. We attend the annual commemoration in The Hague. The Netherlands co-sponsored, you know, the important resolution which was initiated by Bosnia with support of Germany and Rwanda and also the Netherlands, which recognized July 11th as International Day of Reflection on the commemoration of the genocide in Srebrenica. And Sabina just mentioned the placeholder or the monument to which the Netherlands, my ministry and the Ministry of Defense, together also with the City of Rotterdam and the municipality, are participating. So Srebrenica in our relations with Bosnia, you know, plays a crucial role. Still, our relations with Bosnia are more than only Srebrenica. It plays an essential, integral part, but it's more. We had, and we really, it shows also, I think, the political importance that Dutch governments attach to Bosnia and Herzegovina, also because of its history, but also, and I will get to that also later, you know, we want to look ahead to the future of Bosnia, for instance, when it comes to its ambitions to become a member of the EU. But we had visits over the past years of President Bečirović to The Hague, to Prime Minister Rutte, to Sarajevo and also Srebrenica. I mentioned Minister Ollongren, she visited Sarajevo twice. And also Minister of Foreign Affairs Konakovic visited The Hague. You know, it shows these deep links between our two countries, at least at the political level. Then we have, of course, our embassy. You have your embassy of Sarajevo, of Bosnia in The Hague, and our embassy in Sarajevo, which plays an important part also in keeping the memory of Srebrenica alive. It has close contacts with the mother of Srebrenica. It supports the memorial center in Potocari. and it organizes events around this commemoration. But it also adds, and helps to, and then, looking ahead, looks at political developments in Bosnia. How can we, the Netherlands, help Bosnia-Herzegovina in its EU accession process? Because we joined a past history, but I think we can also join, we should join, Bosnia and the Netherlands, a future. And that future lies in Europe. Well, obviously Bosnia is part of Europe, but that future lies within the EU. For the Netherlands government, the current government and previous governments, membership of the countries in the Western Balkans, of Bosnia to the EU is essential. It is essential for peace, stability, but also prosperity of the region. And therefore, it's very important for, in this case, the Bosnian populations. And we see now a war on our doorsteps in Ukraine, how important being part of this community of values and rights, how important that is in order to be able to withstand, threats from the outside. However, as you may know, the Netherlands is also quite critical when it comes to e-enlargement, and also on, the lack of progress, I should say, in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Netherlands wants Bosnia to become a member of the European Union, but it also has to fulfill criteria, like other member states have to fulfill criteria, candidate countries have to fulfill criteria. And there, unfortunately, we see a standstill which is caused, I think, by the lack of political will on the side of politicians in Bosnia and Herzegovina to take these important steps, to introduce these and implement these reforms, because often, it affects their interest. And I should say, and that is something that concerns us most at this point in time. It is particularly Mr. Milorad Dodik, who, with his actions, with his statements, is now a serious threat to the stability and peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we, as the Netherlands, and also within the EU, we are trying to see how we can rein him in, how he could be part again. Perhaps that's an illusion, but we still have to try it. How he can be part again of this political future of Bosnia and Herzegovina. But what we won't allow as Netherlands, as EU, and Mark Rutte said that as Secretary General of NATO, we won't allow a disintegration of Bosnia and Herzegovina to happen again. Let me conclude, Vlado, because perhaps, and I'm happy to further discuss, obviously, our policies towards Bosnia. But let me stress again, Srebrenica and the future of Bosnia is very important to the Netherlands. We have, as I said, our embassy, we have the political visits, we contribute to EU4 Althea mission with Dutch soldiers, and we hope to see Bosnia in a couple of years' time to become a member of the EU. And the last thing I want to say is, because there are many members here of the Bosnian community in the Netherlands here, we are in frequent touch with the community. We see them also as a bridge between Bosnia and the Netherlands, and their contributions also to our thinking is invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kampmann. And, well, dear Gert, for those of you who do not know, he is the head of the Central and Southeast European Division at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and had held a number of positions in the region and outside of the region, and he will stay here with us for the drinks after the event. So please feel free to approach him, as well as to some of other colleagues of mine, which I would just like to mention for a moment, because pretty much the bulk of the leadership of NIOD, Institute for War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies, is also there, starting from the director, Professor Martina Ekman, who is right here, and the head of the collection. So outside of Martijn, Viktor Jan is also here. Professor Uru Umitungor at the guitar, at the bass guitar in the back of the room. And so we just want to make sure that mingling after the event is not solely for the sake of, well, drinking something, but also connecting people who are deeply concerned about this topic, just as our interlocutors are. Our last speaker for tonight, but not at all the least, is Lidija Zelović, whom I would ask to take the stand, and I will announce her just a bit, well, in a very easy way. So Gert was telling a lot about foreign political aspects of Bosnian-Dutch relations, and as much as I am acquainted with Lidija's work, she's a filmmaker, documentarist, and a public figure, if I may add. Her documentary was just awarded several times consecutively, and the name of it is, well, I will actually leave it to you to say why did you make it the way you made it. But what I want to say is, if we heard now about how we address this thing from the point of view of international relations, I think now we might as well hear how do we do it from the point of view of internal relations of a person who had been through the collapse of Yugoslavia and who had been through, well, who had been with us here in the Netherlands for the last 30 plus years. So please, Lidija, take the stand, and thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you very much. I'm not from a Muslim background. I'm supposedly from a Serbo-Croatian background, but I never internalized this. Actually, that only became relevant just before the war started. It fits perfectly in Alma's picture there around the polarization when it all started mattering. Before that, and still, I'm a Yugoslav, Bosnian, Sarajevan, now Dutch as well, and I make films. Actually, before, instead of vomiting, that kind of people. So you can either vomit or make a film. So you can't vomit that much. So I make films. I made 3 films about Srebrenica: one for BBC British TV, one for Belgian TV, and one for Dutch TV. For the rest, I make lots of personal films, which actually goes together with this. Srebrenica is, I think, kind of personal matter for all Bosnians. I make everything I do goes exactly opposite of what my previous speaker said, and I'll keep on doing it. That's all I can promise you. I grew up in a country which was built on solidarity. The main thing was solidarity. It's actually what the European Union says it is now, but all I see, the European Union is actually a place built on economic things. So it actually hurts me to the bone when I hear that Bosnia needs to fulfill this or that, which I completely understand on many levels, that Bosnia needs to fulfill all the other things, but that level from what is needed and how is needed and what is Netherlands or European Union doing towards Bosnia is actually something that I'm, in my way, very much working in my way towards that. I think if Yugoslavia kept on existing, which I'm still sad it's not, I would be a dissident in Yugoslavia for sure, and I definitely am dissident in Netherlands. I made a film, my last film is called Home Game, and actually is about how, what does it mean to be, after 30 years in Netherlands, to be at home. But it was actually a film which I needed to make, again, instead of vomiting, I needed to make the film because I was worried where Netherlands is going, where our politicians are taking us into the polarization. And strangely enough, I was young when war was starting in Yugoslavia, and I didn't realize what was going on. And by seeing it, what was happening what's happening in Netherlands and how the politicians are driving us on different sides, I'm actually realizing what happened in Yugoslavia and what happened in Bosnia and why we live the way we live. So, and I've lost one home, and I will do my very best not to lose another home again. So I wanted to make the film, and I was writing articles, I was writing essays, and every time I was told, this is, when I was telling them, like, it's from where I'm looking at the world, we are really getting so polarized, and everything that Alma showed on a screen, I was recognizing in Netherlands. So I was insisting that we shouldn't get so far. But every time I was told, I'm traumatized, and I am traumatized, which doesn't mean I'm not right as well. So the film needed to say something about how you get into this stage of being polarized and actually maybe ending up in a war. Because with polarized society, you can do anything. You can also push militarization. You can push. Actually, you keep on creating enemies. When you know you are 5 minutes before the war is when you keep on talking in terms of friends and enemies. The whole society, the world is divided in friends and enemies. Then you know it's problematic. What was interesting, I'm independent filmmaker, so I got money from Dutch film funds, and in a script I wrote, if we continue like this, we will get extreme right in a power. And it's not going to be their fault, it's going to be our fault, because we allowed it to happen. And when we got Geert Wilders in a power, that people from the funds were calling me, telling me, your film became relevant. And I was telling them, no, my film is now irrelevant because I'm too late. We are where we are now. Just to give you an idea of how difficult it is to make films, the way I try to tell this different story against everything you do, or at least to not against everything you do, just to prove that you're wrong. All I do is actually that because I'm seen as a refugee. I'm for 32 years in the Netherlands, and whatever I possibly may do, I'm a refugee. So my producer kept on telling me, is like, no, but we need this refugee story. And I was telling, like, listen, I can't be a refugee forever. And first, then I'm telling the story to tell you where we are, where the Netherlands is now. But luckily, I'm not listening to my producer, and he has no say content-wise. But it was just what I'll just try to show you on a trailer. I'll first show you the trailer I made, because I'm making a film in which I'm using our story, everything that my previous commentators was saying, I'm using it to tell this is where Netherlands is going. And what the world around me want actually is to tell my sad refugee story, and to show that I need to fulfill certain rules to be one another. So could you just please play the first, oh, I'm sorry, I need to.
Achter de schermen bereiden de hoogste militairen van ons land ministeries en bedrijven voor op oorlog. De fase van vrede, waarbij de bloemetjes bloeien en de vogeltjes fluiten, is voorbij.
Što se događa? Balkanac, mami. Ajde, Balkanac, čekaj.
Pa lijepo ćemo živjeti.
Naravno.
Ma to odselimo.
Šta?
Kad sam morao napustiti ono gdje mi je bilo srce, jako sam zadovoljan što sam ovdje i baš što sam ovdje.
Sorry, it's not sync, so let me just, because when I make a trailer, it's sync.
I would use an opportunity to say that the kid's name, Lydia's son's name is Sergey, and he is on his way to Bosnia.
Nedjelja je. Vojo i Davor su na utakmici. Lidija priprema ispite, a Vesna joj pravi...
Maybe it's not the point. Maybe you should go and see the film. Please go and see the film. Please, it's still playing in Amsterdam. May I invite you personally to come to The Hague during the NATO? We have a deal?
Achter de schermen bereiden de hoogste militairen van ons land ministeries en bedrijven voor op oorlog. De fase van vrede, waarbij de bloemetjes bloeien en de vogeltjes fluiten, is voorbij.
Što se dogodilo? Balkanac, mami. Ajde, Balkanac, čekaj.
Pa lijepo ćemo živjeti.
Naravno.
Ma to odselimo.
Šta?
Tad sam morao napustiti ono gdje mi je bilo srce. Jako sam zadovoljan što sam ovdje i baš što sam ovdje.
Nevjerovatno nešto. To ovo ne može nikako završiti, nikako.
Sergej se u Holandiji, je li sretan?
Ja sam jako sretan.
Dat is akkoord.
Mark Rutte met zijn 4e kabinet. Rutte 4.
Willen jullie in deze stad en in Nederland meer of minder Marokkanen?
Lydia houdt van Nederland. En ze zegt dat steeds vaker.
Wees boos op mij. Ga niet me steeds zien als een trieste, treurige vluchteling.
Ze hoort nog haar oma. Lydia, het is vrede totdat de eerste kogel is afgevuurd. Dan beseft men dat de oorlog lang geleden begonnen is. Maar dan is het te laat.
Da si među zvijezdicama, među svojim sele moja, među svojim sestricama.
So I'm sorry, it's still not sync. It has to do something with sound traveling from one place to another. So I'm not going to torture you with another async thing. What I wanted actually to show is actually has to do with, for me, I want to tell a story about Netherlands from my point of view, about my Netherlands, about my home. And I was actually, they needed me to tell the refugee story, to keep it back in the past, which would actually prove, that's what I'm saying, that it should prove that here we are better than there. So there is something which will prove about these things, something that we need to think when you say like you need to fulfill the rules. It's so deeply ingrained in a wrong premise of what about solidarity? What is European Union? What is European Union about? And maybe we really could learn a lot on a case of Bosnia. Thank you very much.
Well, I had a pleasurable role here because I got to announce people whose work I respect tremendously, and I want to add something. So Lydia mentioned that she's traumatized, and I will not go into that, but I can tell you for a fact that she's also traumatizing because I watched her movie, and some people here know me and they know that I like to laugh, and I have no problem crying either, but very rarely I do both things at the same time, which is what had happened when I saw the home game. So please see it while you can still see it. With that in mind, I will take the back seat now because a dear colleague of mine, Petar Finci, is going to be chairing slightly more complicated part of this evening, in which we are going to talk together and jointly about these things. The discussants are also warmly welcome to talk with one another in order to react to what they had been talking about, and the entire audience is very welcome to join in, especially Professor Seinkhoff and Professor Ungor, who are supposed to also were very willing to open this congregation. Petar, Godspeed.
Thank you, Vlada, for being just slightly out of time in this part of the evening. So my name is Petar Finci. I would like to thank you all very much for your very meaningful and I would say thought-inspiring contributions, which at certain stage started talking to each other, which I think is a very good sign. But before I give the floor to the audience and aware of the time, I was going to mention just briefly another legacy of perhaps not only Srebrenica, but the wars in the former Yugoslavia, which is very relevant to, I would say, the Netherlands, and in particular to the town where I live, The Hague, which is the International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, which worked at the Hague from 1993 until 2017, when it closed and was succeeded by a body imaginatively known, the Mechanism. which is still working in The Hague, but it's about to close down. And so the building that we have seen perhaps today in The Hague, the iconic, I would say, building of the former Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, was more or less emptied after the tribunal closed down. Only a small part of it now is still occupied by the mechanism. And so the owners of the building, the Dutch government, started thinking, okay, what do we do with this huge piece of real estate in a top location in The Hague? And as Sabina mentioned briefly, they came up with the idea that they would rent it out to another international organization, which we're not going to mention, but then basically that they would tear down all of what the tribunal was and just empty the building and make it into an office space and then rent it out for a lot of money. And so my point here is that it is not only the Bosnian Dutch community that fell through the cracks, it's also the international community that fell through the cracks, because somehow the owners of the building managed to forget that the legacy of the ICTY was not only the UN legacy, it was also very important for the Netherlands, and it was even more important for The Hague, which calls itself the city of peace and justice, among other things because the tribunal was working there. And so luckily, I would say, for everyone involved, except maybe for the, for the people who were going to collect the money, the University of Amsterdam got involved through an initiative that basically came up and said, you can't do that. There's a historical value to that building. You can't just strip it away of all the value, not only emotional for the people in the former Yugoslavia, but also historical value in terms of international justice and development of international law. And so an advisory committee was formed that produced a report, which I cannot comment upon because it's now with the government and it's so still confidential. But some moves were perhaps made in the direction of keeping at least part of that space and transforming it, into a place of memory and of education, and also a place where the Srebrenica monument would be. So that's another aspect that we haven't perhaps explored. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and basically ask our panelists if you would like to say anything about each other's presentations, very politely. And if not, I would like to open the floor to the audience, because I'm sure there will be questions on any of the very important topics that we have opened here tonight.
Peter, maybe
yes, please.
Just an observation.
Please.
As a complete outsider, or partial outsider in some regard, so not being Dutch Bosnian or Bosnian Dutch coming from Australia, I really can see maturity of my fellow Bosnians who are also Dutch by critically engaging with what's the mainstream, which they have become part of. I'm very critical of Australian policies down in Australia, and I think that really demonstrates maturity and level of integration, where you embrace critically, not I'm so grateful you got me here and I'm safe now and I'll be your refugee forever, so you feel good about yourself. It is, I'm here and that's me. And I'm showing respect for this society, for my homeland, if you like, by really critically engaging with core issues. Having come from refugee background, having had the trauma, being traumatized, it's not being impaired, being disabled. It's actually being more sensitized to some issues that you, as just having ordinary linear life without these challenges, won't recognize. That's where injustices hurt us more. And I really felt that in this presentation. At the same token, I really want to acknowledge, first, Dutch people who have engaged with these issues, but also successive governments, not politicians, but governments who have, from 96 until now, really confronted the trauma, confronted the legacy, confronted the guilt. And as we survivors have survivors' guilt, I can imagine that, especially people, and we are, Het and I are probably the same generation in terms of our years. So from our youth years until now, where we are in this stage now of life, that we also have felt some, being part of that, having generational trauma, having generational survivor's guilt in a way, regardless of, being an insider or complete outsider, because it happened in our lifetime. And I salute all my fellow participants in this, and I really, as an outsider coming from Australia, I recognize this as a kind of strength and this maturity of engagement and confrontation, which is direct but not kind of personal.
May I respond to this? And I'm not going to give counter-argument, but that's exactly, I think, one of the reasons why I found it important to participate in this meeting. We can have a disagreement on policies, etc., but I think it's also these personal contexts that we have here and the conversations we have, and your narrative, and there are people also in the room here that I'm meeting, from the Bosnian community. And I think that is important, but it also gives us, I'm a civil servant, a diplomat, but that's for me also important, not only making policies behind my desk, but also to hear these personal stories, and that helps me and my colleagues to think about these relations, and change them where we find it necessary, and advise the minister to do so. So. Yes, it is critical. Yes, I understand it very much, but I also appreciate it.
Thank you.
I would love you to give counter argument. It would be almost, if you want, respecting me in a way. It's like I would love if you could tell me what you thought about my criticism of what you said or what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing or European Union.
Well, particularly on the EU accession process, I mean that's but see, there are. I mean, as I said, for us, the Western Balkans is part of Europe, and it should become the part of the Western Balkans. But you have to share and to commit to. The rules, regulations sounds very bureaucratic, but also the values and the norms of the European Union if you want to become a member of it. I mean, it has happened since the European Union was established. Every single country that became a member of the EU had to go through the same process, and it is a tedious process. But for the European Union, and I think also for the future of the European, it is a process that countries have to go through. And it's about also, commitment of leadership of a country. That they see and share and cherish these values of the EU. Now, the EU is not perfect, far from it. But a country, in this case also Bosnia, the Bosnian leadership, they have to get their act together. With the support of the international community, with the Netherlands, and then they will become a part of the and it sounds very, but this is generally how it works. And also if you want to maintain, and the EU is is being criticized in the Netherlands also. But also and the Europe, the EU is now, I would say, under threat from within. But if you also want to maintain support of the EU within the Netherlands and other countries, then I think, that's the position of the government, then you should be also strict on who would become and should become a new member.
Absolutely, I'm just wondering.
So we see it as an incentive, rather than, pushing other countries away, because that's definitely not the case.
No, I don't think that anarchy, as I may come across anarchic, but I don't believe anarchy is the solution to anything. But these really norms and values, it's something that is really very, where does it come, where does it start, what it is. There is something from above, and there is no solidarity. There is no, European Union doesn't stand for what it says to stand. And because we also have some, but okay, maybe this is for a different discussion, how some countries come in and when others come, what would you help? What is our role? But I see Alma wants to say something. I want to give.
Well, I don't know if I have to say something wise. Lots of thoughts going through my head. So the thing is, you know, you as EU want us to change. But we Bosnians, you know, we are like normal people. The thing is that those leaders always go out there and talk to nationalists, not nationalists, fascists, let's be honest, you know. And then when Lydia and I go somewhere and then they are surprised, like you have like Serbian, Croatian backgrounds, mix, I'm Muslim. Look what happens here. I mean, when you put like a Serb, where is Vlado? He's hiding. Two Muslims, you know, one Serb-Croatian mix, one Bosnian Jew, together, magic happens, you know. Those are normal Bosnian people. Those are people who value human rights, international law, and we have never had issue with each other. So, but we do have issues with nationalists, ultra-nationalists, and fascists. So, and what did European Union and the international community did in Bosnia? Like, let's put Dayton on it, with everybody has their own, how to call it politely. Yeah, and I mean, this just does not work, because we choose in 1992, we want to be one country, one man, one vote, you know. And even here in the Netherlands, I have more right than I have in Bosnia. I mean, I can vote no matter who, but in Bosnia, like, I couldn't be president in the part of Republika Srpska because I got this label of Muslim. And then now you are talking to me, you should solve it together. But we are like in this, how do you call it? Yeah, and you put it on us, so we cannot open it ourselves. Somebody needs to break it down, and we have like five or six like rulings saying that our political system is in violation with the human rights. So we need force to make not those people in Bosnia, but those who do not respect international law and human rights. And we are not going to be there anytime soon if we keep talking to Milorad Dodik. I mean, he's not any different than Mladic and Karadzic, and we know for now that they are like convicted genocide perpetrators. So this is not working, and this is not going to work. Sorry.
I'm aware of the time, and to be completely fair, it was not European Union that actually put Dayton on Bosnia and Herzegovina.
International community.
Yeah, okay, but let's just be fair with respect to that. With that, I would like to open the floor. Aware of the time, we have a little less time than we hoped for, but I have one question just over there. Yep. I know.
Just briefly, because it's very connected to what was just said. As someone who teaches EU law
Macedonia.
And comes from North Macedonia, there are two aspects that I want to kind of clarify. So the solidarity principle is very much related to the internal market. So it is something different than what we in the Balkans perceive as solidarity per se. But my question is about the Copenhagen criteria that you're talking about. So they exist since 1993, so not since the 50s. So therefore, a lot of member states of the EU did not go through the same process of fulfilling criteria. And of course, it shows now with Poland, with Hungary, all those countries, Greece, nothing personal, but it is clear that the history shows that there can be some hiccups that the EU can be blinded over. And the same goes with Ukraine now. To be fair, Ukraine would have never become a candidate if it wasn't for the newly established European identity. But me coming from North Macedonia, that at the time when we became candidates, we had the European identity that is one of the main political criteria, not to speak about the legal ones. So my question is, not to be so critical, but very friendly, bearing in mind that the Dutch government has been historically the one blocking, together with France and other countries, the furthering of the candidacy of North Macedonia, let's say, what is the real criteria behind closed doors that needs to be actually fulfilled so that the process can continue beyond what is known as the rule of law and the 30 or 57 chapters that we need to close in the negotiation process? It is a political process hidden behind illegal political and economic criteria. So what is the behind door criteria that, let's say, the Dutch government and, to broaden it, the EU would find it helpful for these countries to proceed further in membership?
Thank you very much. Shall we collect a couple of more questions? I'm not entirely sure that this question is for this forum, but okay, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. My name is Aishanur. I'm not a political scientist. I'm an anthropologist. I was struck by what you said about the sort of rules and regulations that Bosnia has to abide by in order to become a member. I can understand from, international IR perspective how this works, maybe. But at the same time, I wanted to flag one issue, that is, EU is not an unchanging entity. EU changed in the past 10, 15 years towards a more right-wing, a less tolerant place. So this shows that actually EU is an ongoing process, even for the member states themselves. So this actually shows that at what point, when Bosnia or other sort of like members that are entering the bandwagon, there needs to be a mutual sort of recognition, a mutual sort of acceptance from the EU member states towards the incoming member. This is not just a host-guest relationship. Host is not the only rule maker here. Whoever joins basically lays out rules, and that needs to be also understood and mutually recognized and maybe even tailored. I wonder what you think about that. I wonder if you find it too radical.
Thank you very much. I have two more questions here, and then we are going to try to answer some of them as briefly as we can, even though I think we need a summit for this sort of questions rather than a seminar. But yes, please, two questions here.
I am Paul Staal. I'm former director of Press Now that supported during 15 years independent media in the former Yugoslavia. Okay, that is as an introduction. I have two questions. One is, again, on this issue of Bosnian admission to the European Union. I think it seems like we are further away than ever with the latest development, also surrounding Mr. Dodik, also the role of Serbia and all that. We are further away than ever. And I wonder how it was possible that Croatia, also part of the former Yugoslavia, got so quickly admitted to the EU. And I wonder if I think there was a huge pressure from Germany, who had always very good relations with Croatia, and there was perhaps the Catholicism belief, geloof, religion had also played a role. I can imagine. It's a question, but I think we are far. And appreciating your endeavors where you talked about, I don't see any advance in the admission of Bosnia. The second point is a quick point only. That's a short point. That is about you are here. Does any of you have any feels any support from the former Dutch-Bed people? What happened to them? I saw them mentioned there is some foundation or so. Do they contribute in any way to the advance of that monument, which for my unclear reasons also is not supported by the government 30 years after yet? and not existing. But the former Dutch bad people, are there some people who are still involved and feeling sorry and trying to do something? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another question here, and then we're going to try to answer. A note to the organizers, we need more events about EU accession process.
I am sorry for Mr. Kampman to also address him, but it's not on the accession. It's another point. It's another point Lydia made, and she was describing how we as Europe are being steered into war. We had, not many years ago, 1.3% of the national product. We are already over 2%, and Rutte wants us to get over 5%. And he says we are going to have war. Maybe as a diplomat you can influence a bit your government, but the generals are on the television. Our last F-16 plane has been sent there. But when you look at Israel, not even sanctions are an option.
Okay, now we're definitely moved out of the area that we started with. I'm going to ask you to try to be brief so that we can maybe collect some more questions before the end.
But,
yes,
can I just briefly respond to the quick, and then I will turn to you, because I think...
Let's stay a little bit Bosnia, because if we move on wider to... Sorry.
No, just so very technical, about your last remark. I forgot to stress that, but it was written Dutch Bad 3 is indeed part of the first Werkgroep, so they are involved in the whole process. And for them, this is equally meaningful. I don't know if they are united amongst themselves, but the people from the Dutch Bed who are working with us on the process are really, really helpful and deeply embedded in the whole thing. And then I would like to turn to you, because that's something I kind of did stress, is that at the moment we are in a situation when ministries are pointing fingers at each other, but none of the ministries is actually taking the lead or willing to take the lead and communicate with the national government. Again, there is like this silence, radio silence on their part.
On the future of the building?
Yes, on the future of the memorial space, which includes also the segment of the ICTY building, so Churchill Play and Wine. Because you said in the beginning you opened up with personal connections and that you are listening to us, and then you will indeed talk with them, so please do lobby or talk on our behalf. This is just what I wanted to kind of drop in your lap now.
Just a very brief note from my side as well, speaking about the Dutch Bet and their involvement as the answer to the question. There is an entire project called Facing Srebrenica that is done in cooperation between the Dutch Bet and the survivors on collecting photographs and making meaningful memories of that. It's online. I'm not going to go into details now, but Erna is here, so you can speak to Erna afterwards when we have drinks that I should mention that may motivate some people to be brief.
So there is one thing that I wanted to bring in. It's a sort of a Balkan paraphernalia, but quite an interesting one. You might or might not know that we are extremely defensive of our guests whenever we have them. And I just want to emphasize one strange thing. I used to be something akin of a civil servant, and it always happened to me that I come to a wider gathering, and then I'm being positioned as if I have to respond to every single bit of governmental policies, and as if I'm the member of the Oranje dynasty myself, and so on. And this is rarely the case. Behind the function, there is usually a person, and that person had been really kind to step into this ungrateful role. So, sir, carry it further.
Well, thank you. No, on the EU. I mean, I said it jokingly, but indeed, the EU process, enlargement process, that's not something that I deal with on a daily basis. But obviously, from my responsibility, it is part of how we look at the region. At your question, yes, I mean, in the end, the EU is a political entity, and decision making is done by politicians, and political considerations, Croatia was mentioned, play a role. But at the same time, if the EU wants to continue to be the successful organization, I dare to say, that it is, that has been over the past decades, then I think you could also, you should also ask those countries with all the different, histories and perspectives that want to join this organization to abide by certain rules. But because if not, it may weaken the EU. And again, I mentioned, without mentioning being too explicit, but I think you all know, what we see now within the EU, that certain countries don't play by the rules, and they are undermining the EU. And furthermore, going back to Bosnia, those countries, particularly one, they obstruct a process in which, we, the European Union, but also the Netherlands, can put pressure on certain politicians, Dodik, in Bosnia, and to try to not to enforce, but to push for a change. So coming back, yes, like any association, like any society, if you want to become a member, you have to abide by certain rules, and you have to share these values, and that's what the EU and also the Netherlands have been doing. But I should also say, and that is not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also I served in Skopje for 4 years, and there also, the political leadership in many of these countries, you wonder whether they want to become a member of the EU. Or you can wonder whether they want their countries to become a member of the EU, because they're quite comfortable in the position that they are, which goes at the expense, I think, of the country and of the population. And that is something that the Netherlands, with all its limitations, we're not obviously, France or Germany, etc., is trying to change. And that's why the Netherlands is also putting a lot of input and has, support, for instance, civil society, media, free media. And that's why the Netherlands, traditionally pushes for the rule of law and human rights. Not, as an obstacle, to put an extra obstacle, but to help these voices in society that can bring a change within these countries, and that bring these countries closer to the EU rather than, further from the EU. Because, obviously there are also politicians in the Netherlands that are not in favor of enlargement, but still the current Dutch government, and I can say that on behalf of my minister, is in favor of enlargement and fully supports Bosnia in its strive to become a member. And there are positive examples in the Balkans as well. Montenegro is doing pretty well. It is doing pretty well when it comes to accession. I don't know whether when they will become a member, but I hope it is an example for other countries and for other leaders in the region.
Who will be the next to join the EU?
Well, as it looks now, Montenegro.
I'm really sorry, I can't handle it. It just really is like the proof of hypocrisy, and I think this is what the gentleman before was saying. It was a similar thing with Slovenia and Croatia. Seriously, Montenegro. I'm sorry, we had Ursula von der Leyen 2 months before the students went on the streets. She was saying that Vučić is the perfect example of democracy and they're fulfilling this. They're doing. Serbia is doing great. 2 months later, half of society went on the street. For 200 days, the society is not functioning. This is and this is the Vučić is the person that Ursula von der Leyen said, oh no, yeah, of course, but Vučić is that's the future. Vučić is prepared for European Union. Montenegro, the same thing. There was the most corruption is on a level of is just almost to have respect for it. They came to another level of it. Croatia of the whole thing is like it was Slovenia when it was accepted to European Union has had the case of deleting all Serbs, Croats, and Bosnians from their registers, deleting them. Not what we had with Kinderofvangtoeslag. Deleting like they never existed before they came into, but we somehow decided to ignore it. So this is why these norms and values are very interesting. Who and when do they apply? And to whom and by and how? So it's really is like, and I'm glad. I'm Yugoslav, you know, Slovenia, Croatia, but great, Macedonia, yes, go for it. But then I'm talking about the European Union. When is European Union? What kind of rules do we apply? When is someone ready or not ready to? So it's what I'm trying to say. The interpretations of the norms and values is something that is bothering me, and which comes to all the levels of interpretation. How we're gonna, according to, I completely agree with you, how we may be pushed into war. It all has to do with interpretation. How we interpret rules, and that somehow some are made for interpreting and others are made to obeying to those rules. But this interpretation, I think that all the questions you got here have to do with interpretation of those norms and values we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm sure we will be
case in point.
Happy to continue this fascinating conversation with drinks afterwards. In the meanwhile, if there are more questions from the audience, I've got one there. And again, I'm going to collect a couple of, I'm afraid, last round of questions because, yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Maybe it's a nice question for the end, because my question was more like to the non-diplomacy side of the panel.
Thank you.
Because I mean, I also have a background in cultural studies. I'm always interested in how art deals with remembrance, how poetry, how different forms of culture do this. But then the question is, how do we then come to like also official narratives being informed by that, right? So how do we actually try to influence all these discussions, influence political discussions nowadays, to also like what can art, what can anthropology, what can research do to then go the next step and be like, okay, these stories are on our Instagram account, but they're also listened to in politics. So how does this transfer happen?
Thank you very much. And I've got another question just over there. Oh.
So I'm a student, third year for political science, and I have maybe multiple questions you can decide to answer or not. But I did a research study on UN accountability, and we tried to contact Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But when we did contact, we were met with quite of resentment to speak to students, and that the only people who are valid to speak to were journalists. And that may be a personal opinion of mine, but I do think that since students are the one who are getting the knowledge and shaping the knowledge that will further be transferred to other people, it is important to also acknowledge us as valid knowledge seekers and not just like recognized journalists or journalists from like published or like prestigious journals. And then the next one is also how the knowledge in general in universities is constructed, because as I study political science, I see quite a bit that the way Srebrenica is framed is usually a massacre, which I know that due to the legal definition of genocide, which is also like Western dominant interpretation, it might not be valid to say it's a genocide, yet it's a moral obligation to say or to address things as they are, even if it doesn't abide by legal standards. And then finally, it also kind of connects to scientific colonialism, which there was a research that showed that a lot of historic Dutch researchers do define like atrocities done by the Dutch government as objective or neutral or a mutual beneficiary, like benefits or agreement, which also ties the way that Srebrenica is defined in universities, which, yeah. And power is shared, and the way that it's shared is also power, and the way that it's created and who hears it and who then shares it is authority in itself. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. And there was another one there, and then I'm afraid we are going to have to continue afterwards in a more informal setting.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sarah Sudetic. My father wrote a book on Srebrenica, and both my parents worked for the ICTY. So I had maybe two very quick questions about the legacy of the ICTY in terms of memorializing the Srebrenica genocide, but also the role that the kind of EU should play in kind of international justice and accountability, and also supporting victims in kind of further expressing their feelings in kind of conflict situations and kind of crimes against humanity and genocide situations. So the first question I have, maybe for the panel, we saw a lot of initiatives that were focusing very much on local stories, on human stories. And I think for many people who have links with the ICTY, there was a feeling that the ICTY sometimes was a little bit of a top-down approach and wasn't quite structured institutionally in a way that would allow victims more representation. I think other tribunals have learned a lot from the ICTY and have tried to kind of support more broadly, you know, communities coming forward to tell their stories more holistically. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how can we learn from this experience and how can this shape further accountability trials moving forward? And then the other question I had specifically on kind of how the EU can support transitional justice processes. We've seen Trump's kind of cuts to USAID, like humanitarian budgets, human rights budgets, decimate a lot of work that's being done to kind of document human rights abuses, to monitor conflicts all around the world. And I'm wondering, since we've talked a lot about European values and about the role that the kind of Dutch government played and its responsibility in the Srebrenica genocide, are there discussions currently taking place within like the Dutch ministries or within the EU more broadly as to how European governments can step in and support local efforts to monitor conflict, to detect these signs that genocide or crimes against humanity are getting more and more close, and to kind of support local civil society that's working with victim groups like around the world?
Thank you very much. Whoever cares to answer, I will just say briefly, as I worked for the ICTY for a number of years, it was definitely a top-down approach. It was an institution that was the first of its kind in the modern world, and one could argue the first of its kind ever. And it was an institution that didn't realize that it should speak to the people in the former Yugoslavia for the first 6 or 7 years. And so the official languages of the ICTY were English and French, and other than the judgments, no other material was translated in the languages of the former Yugoslavia, other than that had to be given to the accused. And so when in 1999 the ICTY established its outreach program to try to speak to the people in the former Yugoslavia, it was novel and some call it groundbreaking initiative, because no one ever thought that something like that should be necessary. Because if you look at national courts, they don't really speak to people. They speak through their judgments, and that was the understanding at the ICTY. By the time they realized that they should perhaps make it more clear what they were doing, it was, some would say, far too late, because the narratives in the former Yugoslavia have been solidified around the nationalist positions and so on. And so, not to cut a longish story short, absolutely the communities should have been not only more represented, but they should have been spoken to. And it is something that hopefully the future accountability trials will learn from, if there are any future accountability trials, but that's a different topic. Sorry for this insertion. Somebody, Haris, you wanted to address one of the...
Yeah, just to the first question, the young colleague who asked about the role of art and creativity and kind of cultural space in dealing with heavy topics, heavy issues such as genocide, post-genocide realities, displacement, trauma, and so on. From my fellow Bosnian presenters, you know, we could see that actually creativity and art and these non-conventional approaches are very important, and they work very well. Very often they reflect reality, but sometimes actually they address reality in a way that conventional ways can't do that. Some of the movies, for example, made by Bosnian directors, tackled very, very difficult topics such as war rape, which was systematic, and you know it was very hard to approach that topic in any other way than through kind of fiction, through art. But then it opened up public debate, and it kind of became, in a way, normalized that heavy taboo topic to be publicly debated. I regularly host conversations with artists on these topics, and I call those seminars Voicing the Unspeakable. And last year, Erna was, down in Melbourne. I organized a two-day conference and started with that event. One of the highlights was an Australian author, Gretchen Sherm. She wrote a book, Out of the Woods, a novel about ICTY. A fictional character, legal secretary comes there, assists the judge, and then things happen, and she goes from The Hague and Amsterdam down to Bosnia, Srebrenica, Sarajevo, everything fiction based on extensive research. And a big part of her research was based on a protected witness testimonies. And what happened, that protected witness, who at one stage decided not to be protected witness any longer, but go public, was on the panel, Nejad Avdic. A lot of fiction, kind of his story, which is real, and his scars, 17 bullets he received. He was, to be executed and survived. So became fiction, but it also reached so many audiences in a way that's digestible. And I do believe that art is not there to entertain, but really, as my fellow participants have already shown, is there to articulate in a way that's approachable and not necessarily kind of to stop conversation, but to open up. And there is definitely space. Probably the art, comes at the end if diplomacy kind of fails in the process. And I do believe that art will save us. Yeah, thank you for your question.
Just to add to that, a very technical detail in the architectural practice. Like concretely now for the National Memorial, we are using, for example, material from Bosnia that we are going to bring to the Netherlands here, and we will engage people here in the Netherlands, also officials, to actually help really build the thing. So I think practically with agency, you can do it materially as well. And I think that's also important. And even design, like paper architecture, conceptual architecture, thinking about space. For example, Arna Mačkić has a conceptual design about ICTY building in which she actually destroys the building in a way. Of course, that we don't want to happen, but just as an idea, as a thought, as a concept, is also a way to open up space to talk about it.
And make sure to buy the Volkskrant next Tuesday because...
I think your mic is off.
Sorry. Yeah, make sure to buy the Volkskrant next Tuesday because next story is about artist, Bosnian artist, how she deals with the legacy of Srebrenica genocide because her grandpa was killed there, and she's great. Her name is Elma Čavčić. Sorry, I had to add that.
Now I'll just use my chance tonight, if you by chance were intrigued.